Salve discipuli. Okay, we're going to take a look at lesson 35, grammar. We already introduced to you in class the irregular comparatives and superlatives that were sort of parallel to the English good, better, best, where the word changes form dramatically. Like bonus, which means good, becomes melior, which means best, or better, which means better, and then it becomes optimus, which means best. So we saw all of those in class today, and ultimately learning those is a matter of learning a bunch of vocabulary words. So there's really not much else we can talk about with regard to those. Hopefully you'll get started studying on those right after you watch this video, maybe just 5 minutes today or something like that. Will put you in good shape for the quiz coming up. But all of that said, there are just a few obscure little grammar points in lesson 35 that we want to cover outside of those irregulars that I just talked about. And I'm going to introduce them to you in the form of sentences. So we're going to start with number 1 here that says plus aquae habemus. My guess is most of you can figure this out without me telling you what's going on. Habemus is your main verb. Plus is actually going to act like your accusative here. And then you have the word aquae, which you may or may not recognize as a genitive singular form. Okay? So, if this is our subject and verb, this is our direct object, and this is a genitive, perhaps you can figure out what this means. Do you know? It means we have more of water, which in English we would simply say we have more water. Okay, there you go. That's pretty easy. So the point is, with a word like plus, which means more, you will often have a genitive working with it, and that's how you say more of something. All right, more water is literally more of water. All right, number 2, we'll look at our next new concept here. In number 2, we have habeo as a main verb. We have est as another main verb. We have est here as another main verb. We're going to have duos fratres as our accusative. And really that's all we have for that part. Then we have maximus as a nominative, fortis is a nominative, minimus is a nominative, I can tell from those US endings. And then celer is a nominative as well. So, habeo, same verb as up here, different subject. I have duos fratres, I have 2 brothers. Okay, simple enough. Then we're going to have some more information about those 2 brothers, the maximus and the minimus. Okay, and note the expression maximus natu, minimus natu. Okay, natu basically means by birth. So, what do you think is the idea behind the maximus by birth and the minimus by birth? Okay, it's going to be the greatest by birth is strong, the smallest by birth is swift. In other words, the greatest by birth, what do you think that means, class? The oldest. So the oldest one is strong. The minimus, the smallest by birth, what do you think that means? The youngest is quick. Okay, so I have 2 brothers. The oldest is brave, the youngest is quick. Make sense? This is how you express oldest and youngest. Greatest by birth, smallest by birth. Alright, now we're going to look at another sentence. In this sentence we have an accusative of equam minorum. We have a main verb of video. And we have a prepositional phrase in medio agro. Alright, so we start with our verb here. Note the O ending, that tells us what our subject is. I see a smaller horse. Minor is just the comparative for small. I see a smaller horse in medio agro. Medius means middle. So this means in the middle field. Okay, so does that mean that there are 3 fields, for example, and I see a horse in the middle one? No, most likely not. What the Romans are really saying here when they say in the middle field is in the middle of the field. So this is how they say in the middle of something. So I see a smaller horse in the middle of the field. Okay, similar to that, we have in this next line the prepositional phrase in summa villa. Then we have an accusative of auem pessimam and a main verb of audimus. Okay? These two are going to be parallel. So notice the mus ending. We hear auem pessimam, the worst bird, in summa villa, in the highest house. Well, that sounds weird. Do they really mean that they hear a bird in the tallest house? No. Kind of like this was in the middle of the field, this is going to be on the top of the house. Okay? In the highest house really means on the top of the house. So we hear the worst bird on the top of the house. Okay? If you want to take a second here to practice what noise you think the worst bird would make, by all means, go ahead. One more sentence here, number 5. For number 5, we have a main verb of est. Then we have a prepositional phrase in extremo flumina. Then we have excuse me a second. Okay, Discipoli. So in this one we have an extremo flumina as our prepositional phrase. We have est, and then we have maius mare as our nominatives. Okay, and this is a tricky sentence. In Italia is also a prepositional phrase. What? Get out of here. Ugh, there we go. In Italia is also a prepositional phrase. We want that to be in blue. It's amateur hour here, boys. Alright, so there is a greater C in extremo flumina. Okay, in extremo, extremis means like the farthest part or the extreme. Okay, so we might say at the end of the river. All right, rather than saying in the farthest river, we would say at the end of the river. There is a greater sea at the end of the river than in Italy. Okay, so that in Italy itself, there's not that big of a sea, but there's a greater sea at the end of the river. This is a pretty terrible sentence, I won't lie to you. But there is a greater sea at the end of the river than in Italy. So at least you can see how medius, summus, and extremis can work. In the middle of the field, at the top of the house, at the end of the river. Alright, so all that's good. Now, before I leave you, I'm going to give you a famous saying from one of my favorite Romans. Okay, and that saying is, Bonitas non est pessimis esse meliorum. Okay, this is real, legitimate Latin. This is going to be difficult for us to translate. So I want to walk you through it, and then I want to leave you to contemplate what Seneca meant by this. Seneca, by the way, is a famous tutor, really. He does a lot of things. He was a philosopher, he wrote plays, etc. But he was perhaps most famous for being the tutor of the Emperor Nero. And you've probably heard of Nero before, and you're probably aware that Nero went a little bit crazy. Well, he did most of his going crazy after he fired Seneca. Okay, so Seneca for a while kept the guy kind of sane. Alright, so black underline, by the way, people, is for ablative. So we've got Bonitas non est pessimis esse meliorum. This is something Seneca said. Bonitas, it doesn't look like it, but it's actually a nominative. It goes bonitas, bonitatis. Okay, so non est bonitas means it is not goodness. All right, it is not goodness, and you can see the bonitas, the root bonus, right? The word good comes from this. It is not goodness. Essa, this comes from sum essa fui futuris. Essa is the infinitive form. It means to be. It is not goodness to be. Then we go to our accusative, right? From infinitive to accusative. We've seen this before. It is not goodness to be better. Melior, meliors, better. Then we have an ablative comparison. To be better than the worst. Okay, in other words, than the worst people. So, it is not goodness to be better than the worst people. What do you think Seneca means by this? At the beginning of class, when we meet next, I'll probably be asking you what you think Seneca means by this, so hopefully you've done your job and thought about it, and you can give me some sort of answer to this question. What does it mean to say it is not goodness to be better than the worst people? Alright, Discipuli, that's all we have for today. This was a rather short video, so I would highly recommend you do just a little bit of study and a vocab before you put your Latin homework away.